All right, nice one. Morning, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday special. Well,
Morning,
guys,
everyone.
um,
Morning.
yes, welcome to this week, guys. Yet another Sunday special property chat, and just to throw things into the mix, we're also gonna talk a little bit of crypto stuff and how things kind of impact, uh, possibly how things are being done, and all this blockchain stuff. So this was something that we meant to cover last week, but as I said in the description, kind of we start with something and we never go when we never know where the conversation is going to go and end up. So yeah, this week we're starting with some blockchain crypto stuff and just kind of in general having a bit of a chat between property people. What are your thoughts? What are your kind of visions for the future of blockchain and property, and how those things can be related? Anyone wants to start?
You see a lot of these questions posted on Facebook property forums, like, oh, which one, property or crypto, or which one do you
Oh
think
yeah.
is? And they're very kind of, they're not good questions to ask. They're probably the worst way to ask any kind of question. Like, red or green. Well, red or green isn't a good question, right? Is it viridian or is it magenta? Like, go down into a little bit of detail. And the problem with this is that people just look at you're a property investor or you're a crypto investor. People forget there's gold, there's bloodstock, there's cars, there's watches. There are
Wine, diamonds.
I love the order in which you did that as well. Like bloodstock would be second. That's fantastic.
Well, I hear that makes a fair bit of money.
There's some interesting income streams in that department, that's for sure. Especially if you win a couple of derbies or whatever.
One or two of those, and I think you're set for a couple of months, aren't you? We may even make the kind of money that Mr. Harper does in a day. So let's diversify. I mean, I've always said, I gave a talk a number of years ago at probably one of the very early kind of Partners in Property London events, and it was a very kind of opener talk to kind of like auctions and property in general, and I always put in there the egg to basket ratio. It is unwise to put all your eggs in the same basket, because if you drop that basket, all your eggs are gone. So, and I used to equate that to, in the 2007 crash, I knew an investor that owned, I think, 30 or 40 properties in Rickmansworth, 7 or 8 properties in Chorley Wood and Croxley Green, all around that kind of area. Every single property went down in value, except for the ones that were in Rickmansworth Town Centre.
Wow.
Every single one. So, diversification works in some respect. It doesn't work in others. Because actually what he had was, he had bought the same looking asset, same 3-bedroom rental properties in those 4 different, very, very well connected areas to each other. And obviously the requirement for a 3-bedroom house in Croxley Green dropped, but a 2-bedroom flat flew. So although he had area diversification, minor diversification, he didn't have diversification of asset. Diversification of quality of asset. Everyone believes they have to have the same asset, the same quality, the same tone, easy to manage, easy to look after. But the problem is, when the winds change and it wipes out one of those assets, it wipes it out, right? Which is, I've gone around the world to get to my point, which is usual for me.
I think he just did that Jordan Peterson thing.
I just did a Jordan Peterson. I hope so. To be likened is actually that makes me smile. But no, the reality is that yes, crypto is a good investment. Yes, property is a good investment. Yes, everything is a good investment. But, when, why, and how, you can't ignore those things. If you do the research, if you're savvy, if you dip your toe in before you stick your entire fist in, if you do all of these things in incremental steps, if you pay attention, if you have a goal that you're looking to achieve, and you're not in it for quick, fast money that you're going to win millions overnight, if you do some kind of courses, not property specific courses, but if you went and learned, went to Oxford or something like that and did one of those evening courses about how to trade stocks or something like that. You know, those are all first steps that you can take. But a lot of people just see the end result. You know, that's what, even as investors like ourselves, that's what we do. We don't, myself and Piotr, when we buy a property, we don't take pictures of getting the keys and opening the front door. We're not those people. But at the very end of the project, where it's made money and we've done something interesting, we're going to make a little bit of a noise about the something interesting that we had done. But the problem is people only see that end step. Oh, they bought this, then this is the money, so I can do the same thing. But there is a multitude, a plethora of things that happen in the middle, things that go wrong, that people don't really understand or go through. And I think it's the same with every investment. I think what a good question is, who here is investing in crypto? And that's open out to us, but also to anyone who's watching, who wants to put their hand up and say, this is what I'm doing.
I had a really fascinating chat with someone this week, and it really it showed a new angle to me. And I went into that conversation, as I always try to, with a very open mind, not understanding psychology, understanding bubbles, understanding markets and how they behave. Not always been able to predict them accurately, of course, otherwise I'd be an extremely wealthy individual. And it was really interesting on a couple of levels. One, in terms of, you know, why he was saying what he was investing in, which is something that vests. It pays effectively a dividend, I suppose, is the best way to describe it, every 8 hours. And why it isn't a Ponzi scheme, and the fluctuation side of it. And I had one side, the angel on one shoulder is sort of screaming, this just sounds like really dangerous, really fake, really whatever. But the devil on the other side saying, but you need to give this due attention and consideration. And that's what started me thinking, which was the core of why I went the angle that I did with the supplement today, and the whole belief system thing, because you can't decry what other people believe in when you can, but it's a pretty thankless task. You know, look at the way that the government run the country on a populist basis, for example. It matters to them what the majority think, or what they think the majority thinks, which is also interesting because it's not always that easy to measure. But belief systems run through everything that we do, all the way through to the big one in the world, and that is just money. Money is the biggest of them all, you know. And the earthquake through that in 2008, the earthquake through that in the pandemic, the people looking at the people who, you know, Elon has Grant Cardone his net worth in the last 22 months or whatever, he's more than 10x'd it, which is just ridiculous, as we talked about last week. It's a fascinating subject, and that's why you need to be open. And I think that what you say, Jay, is inherently correct, as in you can be involved in the most difficult. I'll give you an example. You know, when I went through university, I paid for my battles, as we call them, at the alma mater. I paid, which was my rent, basically. I paid for my rent and my lifestyle through playing fruit machines, and that's a pretty ridiculous thing to do. But there's a lot of maths involved, and there wasn't as much gambling as everybody might think there would be. But the house edge was 22% plus. Sometimes it was 30%. So you could go into that saying, what a ridiculous game to try and beat. You know, you can go and beat blackjack, which has a house edge of 1.5%. You know, actually with blackjack, you can't turn the odds quite as much in your favor as you can with fruit machines, interestingly enough. So it's the operator and the skill set of the operator, not the game necessarily. I mean, obviously some games, if you're playing against the guy who find the lady or puts the tea under the cup or whatever, you're never going to win that one, right? Because that's a fix, right? But generally speaking, and actually you can beat those guys, I should say, because what you do is you make it very clear that you've got a bit of money. Then you start with a very small wager, and they use what's called the convincer, and they let you win the first wager, then you just run away. So that can be done, but I don't recommend it because they tend to chase you, and they're quite fast, and they've got people in the crowd helping them out. So not that I've ever done that, of course, but you can. It's the skill level of the operator, not necessarily the game that they play. That's the thing. I know, and one of the things that I've probably been concerned about, because I'm an idiot who worries about what other people do. I don't know why, but I do. Is that some of the operators I've seen getting involved are not traders. They don't have that skill set. They don't have their emotions in check. And we could be talking about shelling peas, or we could be talking about Ethereum. Either way, they shouldn't be getting involved in it, and they are. And properties, that's not crypto. That's
I think
some people in property, they shouldn't be involved in property. Sorry.
Yeah, I think crypto is very much a bit like commercial property, because it's like the value of the commercial property is like very much tied to like the location and the usability of it, like how many people can use it, the footfall and stuff like this. And with cryptos, it's a lot of the same.
Interesting analogy, Bill. Yeah. So you guys, Piotr and Helen, put their hands up when we were talking about who's playing in the space. So why don't you guys, share some of your pearls with us mere fools who are not yet stuck in.
So for old people like me, can somebody just explain what is crypto?
Helen?
GG's
I was going to let you do it. You like unceremoniously outed me. I don't talk about that part of my investing generally, with the exception of today, because it's you lot, publicly, because I don't want to be the person encouraging people who haven't got a clue what they're doing to get into that space. Exactly like Jay was saying, it can be very dangerous to just kind of go all in, and Sod's Law says if you don't know what you're doing and you don't understand trading principles, and I trade it unsurprisingly in a very specific technical TA way, and look at my numbers and my Fibonacci levels, and I'm doing it on the numbers and the maths the whole time, with a bit of gut instinct, actually, I have to say. But I wouldn't want to encourage people to get into it, because what I was saying was Sod's Law says everybody sees, oh my God, Bitcoin's at a new high. Let's get in. Oh my God. Like, no. Basic rookie trading error 101. And it goes back to a principle of mine in investment, whatever it be, property, crypto, gold, diamond, like whatever it is, earn your right to risk. Like, I don't think people should be getting into stuff that they don't understand. There's definitely lots of training. There's lots of very bad training in crypto, as much as there is in property. And there's some good stuff as well. But understand what you're doing and dip that tiny little toenail, not even toe, into it. I got into it a few years ago, and my first investment was 60 quid. I bought one Litecoin for 60 quid. 60. And let me tell you, my pot to play with, and I do have a play pot, and it's viewed very much as a play pot, was a lot bigger than that. So that's the type of like play money I think somebody. And I had that for a year, and I watched what Litecoin did, and I watched it go all the way up, and I watched it come all the way down, and I just had my 60 quid in it. And that was the best, seriously, 60 quid, which has now made me a lot more than 60 quid. But for a year, and you need that discipline to watch and paper trade. That's my top tips.
Yeah, it's the same when we tell people for auctions, like you sometimes just need to like watch the catalogs and see how things develop, perform, how you would react to things emotionally when something goes for a lot of money, but then you see it back in the auction 3 months later for much less money, and like all those kind of things. It teaches you on more than just a theoretical level. It's more like it's real stuff.
Yeah, you're building up your database, you're building up your understanding of the market, and particularly something as volatile as crypto, not just Bitcoin but the altcoins as well. You need to understand, like, somebody get really excited about 5% in a day. 45% in a day, like Algo did recently, is going to blow their tiny minds. So and then you have lost kind of objectivity, and emotion gets in there, and you have no chance of making logical, rational decisions.
Yeah.
So I would recommend a year's discipline of paper trading.
So Ross still doesn't know what crypto is.
Oh, okay.
Shall we?
So what good does it do? I actually know what it is, but what good does it do? Now, what can you use a Bitcoin for?
You can buy pizza.
You give it the 2 pizza story that Adam told us earlier. That was really good.
Yeah. Well, you can do more than that.
I started up as a pizza salesman about an hour ago when I read that.
Well, I think the way Bitcoin isn't like the Bitcoin was the first one to be kind of very popular, and but the usability is in most of the other coins and most of the other projects. I think Bitcoin is really just used for exchanging like currency, like transaction really element. But there's a lot of other coins that have got practical like uses, and I think there's a lot about sort of like gaming cryptos and the kind of stuff where people actually play games, and there's way more people playing games than there used to be in the past, and because of that gives kind of each project or coin or like it gives it value. So,
there is a certain element in there as well of a supply and demand.
Yeah.
A lot of these coins, like Bitcoin, has a limited supply. You know, in the way that gold is valuable because, you know, the estimated mass of gold on the planet is estimated to be X and nothing more than X. It's the same way that Bitcoin is destined to be. This is the amount of Bitcoin there is. There's only so much farming, but then Bitcoin ends here. You got Litecoin, Ethereum, XRP, all these other things.
Jay, this is feeling a little bit like there's only 3 tickets left, so we better run to the back of the room. So I'll be back in a
Don't get your credit cards, get all 4 of them out. But no, the reality of the situation is, and I think Piotr touched on it, is the ones that I'm looking at, the coins are backed by a function. There is it either, you know, the coin either facilitates something that's already on the blockchain, it facilitates another piece of tech, or it's connected almost like a stock to another piece of tech. Because for me, and this may be where a lot of people fall down, because I don't know everything about crypto or blockchain, the same way I don't know everything about property, right? But I know far less about blockchain and cryptocurrencies than I know about property. So for me, it's kind of like, well, what utility does this have? And then what value can I ascribe to that utility? Because there are just some coins that exist because someone's made up a coin, as far as I can tell, right?
Yeah.
And look, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if it gets the right kind of momentum, you can make a lot of money, but then, you know, people realize it's, you know, a feather cloud and it disappears.
If you get Elon to tweet about it, you can make a couple of quid, I hear. Yeah,
That's it. Yeah. It can moonshot. I think they call it moonshotting.
Yeah.
But you know, I've spoken to 3 or 4 people about crypto. I've spoken to Piotr. The only thing I bought en masse that I did absolutely no research in at all, I did off of Piotr's say so. that's a level of faith in a person. He goes, go and buy this now. Don't ask any questions. It's going to make money long term. I was like, okay. So I went and bought it, and it's doing really very well. But as with most things, it's doing very well now. It can go down, which it's likely to. It can go up, which it's likely to. But I do like the volatility. It's kind of like in 2008, 2009, I wasn't really active in property because it was, I didn't have the capital, and a lot of people who I was using the capital from lost a lot of confidence in the property market, which is fair. So I took whatever lump sums I had available, and I was trading stocks. I was playing with currencies and bank values and things like that. So I bought and sold a fair bit of Barclays, and I did a fair bit of US dollar to European, all the fun, boring stuff, right? But I day traded that quite a bit, and that basically bought me a house. So I had fun doing that. But I think one of the distinctions here is a lot of people who are going to be watching this or following us are probably just property people. I know a fair few of them have migrated across from financial services or whatever. So they will have an understanding or a backing into what trading and what these kind of intangible kind of assets have, right? But for me, I think I think it goes back to what I've already said. You really need to be very switched on with how you view these kind of things. I spoke to somebody, again, another kind of a numbers person like you, Adam, very, very kind of stoic, not really overly emotionally invested. And I've taken 2 or 3 hints or tips from them on which ones to buy. But, you know, she always comes out and says, look, you're doing it because of this. This isn't a trade stock. This is a hold stock. You know, put it in the back cupboard and look at it in a year's time. Like, don't pay attention to it. It's not going to do your mindset any good to be watching it every minute of every single day. So there are 3 or 4 cryptos that I've got on one of these little servers. I don't know what they're really called, platforms.
Ledger or wallet.
And I don't look at it. But like, the money's in there, it's sitting there. It's not money I need access to. It's not money that needs to be paying for bills or that can be put into an investment or anything like that. It's just kind of like, and it's not that much. I don't want to get down like there's
so we can't let this go without a little hat tip to Uncle Warren, I don't think. And one of the things that he always says is that's part of a lot of the skill is sitting on your hands. You know, I say to people, you know, I've got money in various bits of different things, some extremely high risk, some relatively low risk, half decent return stuff, like within ISA wrappers, for example. And I just don't look. It's not that I don't care. It's not that I just don't. My brain is trained not to look. So a friend of mine who we've done some very similar investments in our ISAs, I'll see him sometimes and I can read his face. Like, we lost as the ISA gone down today. Even though I've said to him, just don't look, just don't look. But he can't stop himself. And it's like, you, my friend, should not be a crypto trader. That much I can tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's you and not the same thing with like stocks. Like there are some stocks. I've got some very, very minor investments in stocks, but there are ones that I just know I don't need to look at it. I could stick it away for 5 years, and the idea for me is actually to forget that it exists. I don't want to calculate anything. I don't want it to impede, or because knowing it's there doesn't change what it's going to do.
I don't know who first said it. I think it was Thomas Edison. But don't wait to buy property, but buy property and wait, or whatever. But
did he put that on the internet?
That was one of his that's one of Thomas's most recent Facebook posts.
Working beyond the grave. I channel him quite regularly. Yeah, absolutely. Just put my fingers in the plug in the light bulb socket and channel the inner Edison.
Nice.
So,
sorry, Piotr, go ahead.
No, you guys go. Go ahead, Adam.
Cool. I was only going to say, is it worth talking about the blockchain at a little bit more length, Jay, Helen? Obviously not.
I don't know. I think for stuff like this, I think if you go, you in the same way that people can go, you can go deaf to it. If there's too much information from 2 different areas, I think people just start, the active listening falls to pieces a little bit. In the same way, I'm rewriting or making a ton of notes on the Before the Hammer Falls book, because we're going to try and do something special with it. So I'm taking out old things, adding new things, because a lot has changed in 2 years. But I have to stop every 45 minutes because you go blind to it. You're paying attention, but you go blind to it. And I think this is the kind of thing where I don't think anyone wants to be thought of as pushing it as an investment or a strategy. Certainly not. Like when I said I've got very little money in it, I think it's like 4 figures, and it's barely 4 figures. I think it's £1,000 spread across like 6 coins. Like it's quite literally nothing. Like I'm not.
So that's interesting. That's interesting, isn't it? Because with that article, the stats that I shared, as I say, I'm not sure how accurate or not they are, but presumably the transparency of the blockchain allows them to be accurate. That the average investor in the US has kind of got about $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in them, and that 94% of those people are below the age of 40. I found that fascinating.
Yeah.
But also, I wasn't too worried about. I mean, for example, second-hand experience, I suppose. But one of my first-hand experiences is from the 2017 crash, which happened around Christmas Eve, if I recall correctly. I think it was about a week after a certain educational company started selling courses on it. That was the very, very top of the market. I couldn't talk about this without just sticking the knife in a little bit there. But it's a classic situation. It's a bit like the old, as soon as the tallest building in the world is announced, then prepare for the crash sort of thing. It's that classic when the taxi driver's telling you what stocks to buy or properties to buy or crypto to buy. That's the time when, you know, everyone's involved. But if the average exposure is that sort of money, you know, £5,000 to £7,000 for someone, it doesn't sound too worrying. But I did have a heating engineer who phoned our office just in early 2018, pretty much absolutely broken, saying, I've lost 50 grand on crypto. And he was a fairly devout religious guy whose religion wouldn't allow him to gamble. So I didn't get into a coaching session right there with him, because obviously it was too late, you know. And he was begging for work, and it took him all that time to pay back. And that's exactly the sort of your two stories of exposure there, and the amount of exposure is probably the best thing anybody could take away from this discussion, I think. And his all in, you know, some of that was borrowed money. It wasn't even all his own money, the total other end of the spectrum. But he could have lost that on caravans. He could have lost that on cuckoo clocks. He could have lost that on whatever.
Yeah. So I think as property people, we all look at what property does and how it works. And crypto is this thing that lots and lots of property people, there are a few people you're hearing stories about. So they're loud and proud about what they actually do in property and properties they're buying and the deals they're doing because they understand it and know it. But what they don't do is they don't tell you that they've lost 100 grand in Bitcoin, or they've, like, you know, they might have made money. We know some, we all know, I wouldn't mention names, but we all know some of them who are like lively in the property market and out and about there and tell you how well they're doing all these things. It's the speed of how fast they can lose their actual capital that I find quite frightening. I bought last year, when the number of deals died at Christmas time, I bought number plates, I bought watches, I bought things, I bought some cars. I made more money in cars this year than I made in anything, which is quite unusual. If you ask my wife, I normally lose money in cars. I bought number plates. I sold 2 this week. Bought one for 1,500 quid in November last year, sold it there for 5 grand. I bought one for £2,200 and I sold it last week for 10 grand.
Decent ROI there, Chief. Yeah, decent IRL.
Absolutely, but then it comes down to this. It's not. Lots of people are doing it, so I'm not saying it's not. Their watches are the same. Some watches have just been incredible. I was out for dinner with a friend who's wealthy, and I was chatting to him. I'd been offered a watch as a part exchange for a house, and I said to the guy, "Okay, well, I'm up for that. The house is about 700 grand," and I said, "Yeah, I'm up for that." And I said, "How much is your watch worth?" And he said, "Well, I paid 90 for it last Christmas." Young guy, I paid 90 for it last Christmas, but it's worth 145. I'm like, pound? And he went, no, thousand. This is not the end of the story, Helen. And I'm like, okay. So he tells me what it is, and I've heard of the brand because I know my watches. I'm like, right, geez, I didn't realise they'd gone up that much. I then went for dinner that night with a guy who's very wealthy, and I was saying, I didn't realise those RM watches had done quite as well as they had. And he said, oh, what had you heard? And I told him the story. He went, yeah, the cheap ones have done really well, but wait till you see this. So he's bought one for 850,000. It's currently worth $4.3 million.
A watch?
Yeah, that's what I was like. A watch?
I've got a dream watch. I don't do much in the way of possessions. Like I'm not a flashy bastard or anything like that. But there is a Patek Philippe. It's called the Moon and Stars. It is the most outlandish looking watch. I'd never wear it. I'd never let sunlight see it. It's like £1 million worth of watch.
Yeah.
Like and you just sit there and think £1 million for a watch, but it's a thing of beauty. It's not just a watch because it's functional. This is one of the things we're talking about crypto, right? It's functional. It's beautiful. And it's they make X number of limited.
But these limited things are the things that you can do really well with in a growing market. So I bought quite a lot of number plates last year, and the market might keep going, it might not keep going. I'm not staying in the UK, so I don't have 6 cars, so I've got nothing to put them on, which was part of my sales pitch to myself when I was pissed. Sorry, I had a couple of years I was on the online auctions. But that was part of my sales pitch. Well, I can use it, I can put it in my cars, it doesn't really matter, whereas I've got them all sitting in bits of paper just now, so that's not good for me. But for watches, it's down to supply and demand, as it will be for crypto, as it will be for all these different things. But it's actually quite hard to know which ones are in low supply. Patek Philippe's, if you buy a Nautilus, new, it's £26,000. You can walk into the Patek Philippe showroom if you can get one, which you can't, and it's worth £80,000 the minute you walk, £75,000 the minute you walk out the door with it. So you can buy something brand new and it will triple in value or quadruple in value virtually overnight.
Sorry, I have to go, guys. I've got some research to do.
All of a sudden, Helen's liquidating her crypto stock.
like this.
Suddenly, never want to watch in my life. Suddenly develop an interest.
You'll have 5 next week. You'll have 5.
But what you're talking about is you understand the market that you're in, and you understand like the value, and also, you know, as I do with a lot of stuff, particularly like that Litecoin and the stuff that I do. If your pockets are deep enough to hold it such that you aren't, it's the same with a house. If you buy something, you never want to be forced to liquidate it.
Yeah.
Because sod's law, when you need to liquidate, that is when every other bugger needs to liquidate it as well. So, yeah, I've watched my crypto stuff go up and down and all over the place. And I just don't, at some points, you just don't look at it and you're just like, you know, you wait for it to come back up. But again, I've got amounts in that I don't need it to pay my electricity or my terrible Wi-Fi today, for example. I mean, I've taken it to kind of a new level. I've got so many like altcoins, but I've got tiny amounts in everything because I'm looking at it now almost like a VC fund. Like you back, you know, and we are talking kind of super speculative at the riskiest end of investments, any type of investments, whether it be crypto or any normal kind of VC stuff. But you stick a small token amount in 10 or 20 of these things. One of them is going to moonshot probably, and the other 19 might crash and burn, but you would hope that one more than compensates for what the other 19 do. But again, you know, it's the tiny amounts, and it's understanding your risk appetite and what you can afford to lose in those. So
yeah. Great. Well, that's a fascinating conversation. And do you guys think, like Adam, you covered quite a bit about like the supply of properties that not that many are coming up, and do you think that's going to have impact on the values of properties kind of going forward?
Well, I mean, I think it's a big deal about the impact that it's had so far has been massive, and that's why, you know, nobody that I saw do any commentary apart from, I think, Peter Hempel wrote a fantastic piece in the April 2020 Property Investor News that I reread about 2 months ago, and I'm pretty sure in that piece he said that a lot of stuff would not come to market for a period. I certainly don't remember having those thoughts myself, because my thoughts were more focused on, well, the market is closed at the moment. I thought people would try not to move to an extent, but I was also thinking, but surely there's going to be motivation, because there's going to be crisis, there's going to be crack, there's going to be. It was only when the generous teats of the government were offered with such open arms that were far beyond my expectations of what they would do on that front, that it suddenly started to become clear. And then the stamp duty holiday and the reopening of the market, and then everything else. And it was like, so then I was very quickly from April. I think I was, my recollection is I was quite a lot less bearish. I think I saw either Knight Frank or Savills suggest there was going to be a 40% drop in values in April 2020 for 2020.
Yeah.
And I was at 5 to 10%, and I'm probably on, well, I will be on video somewhere having documented that, that I thought that's more realistic. And I think I was right at the top end. Yeah, everybody else was at where I was or lower, or maybe some people said it'll probably stay the same. Didn't see anyone predicting 12% up and stuff like that actually, you know, manifested itself. But the supply, I've said this week in the supplement, I love Jay's chat, made me feel strong and good last week, because I thought we're going to see a load of auction stock. I really hope we are. I know that at the beginning of the year, I was certainly, again, recorded somewhere doing some predictions for the year. And I was predicting more stuff coming to market in Q3. I think Jay was doing the same. Sadly, we were both wrong. But will we see, it's the chap from UK Finance and the repo side of things that, again, an organisation like the Bank of England that choose their words fairly carefully because they can influence things, so they have to be cautious. Also means, of course, they don't always say exactly what they really think. So there's the political side to that as well. But they did use a word that was about gradually, and I just thought, I wonder behind the scenes. Like I mentioned this week to someone. I remember in April 2020 when there were a couple of banks that did a couple of interesting things. Nationwide pulled their products above 80% loan to value, and also HBOS Lloyd's pulled their products above 60% loan to value. A big fuss was not really made, but there was messages between myself, my friend who runs a hedge fund advisory service. I was talking to Rod 42 times a day, Kwesi, who obviously very, very switched on people, and saying, is this the start of a crash? I didn't say anything publicly because I didn't want to concern people with things that are outside of our control anyway. Is there a credit crunch coming? Is there a liquidity trap coming? And then for whatever happened behind the scenes that none of us got to see, or maybe Kwesi did, but he probably can't tell us anyway. But what we actually saw was those very quietly, those products pretty much just came back to market very, very quickly. Whether they were nudged by the Bank of England, I personally suspect that they would have been, or even the Treasury, to say, look, this is not the time for confidence to wane in the financial services sector, because one thing could start a vortex spiral downwards. We're already at the start of a pandemic. Don't do this. Don't do it, and take your responsibility seriously. And I'd be stunned.
So we lost,
to be honest,
Adam, for yeah, we're back. You're back.
I mean,
yeah, I was pretty much done. I was only saying I think those conversations were happening, if I'm honest, but I don't have any evidence of that.
I think the morning supplement, there were some absolute gems in there. I always enjoy it, but there were a couple of bits that actually had me like really smiling. There were the bits towards the end, and I find myself agreeing, because I said quite boldly last week on this supplement that, you know, I've been speaking to asset managers, people operating on behalf of banks, blah blah blah, and they're saying this, and I didn't really back it up with any kind of concrete figures. But then you went and did a little kind of analysis, and I was like, okay, well, this sounds good. But it sounds very contrary to what I had said. So I'm sitting there thinking, halfway through the thing, I'm sweating, thinking, oh God, have I completely ballsed it up and no one paying attention? And then you got towards the end, and it was but what we need to take into consideration is the other pressures, the other debt pressures that people have, loans, other things like that, which may push them across the line, voluntary or involuntary, for their mortgage and being repossessed, than the actual, you know, amounts that they haven't been paying. And I thought that is exactly it. That is the bit that you know, I definitely, before reading that, it was kind of one of the things, because I hearing what those people had said, there's a bit of trust I have inherent in what they're saying, because they're bringing whole teams back in to deal with this. They're having conversations with their clients, these banks, on a regular basis, and they are charging up, ready to be dealing with, you know, an Epicurean kind of flood of stock. And like you said, I don't think all of it's going to go to auction. I think most of it's going to find its way to the secondary market, maybe the primary market, and then maybe back to the tertiary market, which auctions is, you know, if we think about it in the best possible light, it's tertiary. It's probably far lower than that, considering the size of the marketplace that it holds. But it's all of that secondary stuff, all of the debts and the pressures, you know, lost jobs, reduced income. If they did lose a job, they're re-employed, but maybe it's less income, or maybe it's you know, bonuses based, and all these different things affect affordability, affect, you know, stuff like that. And on top of the fact that we've been through, we are going through a baby boom. It's now baby boomers part 2. This is kind of like a war of attrition that we've been in for the last 2 years. The amount of people that have been supposed to be keeping 2 meters distance, there's been some epic sex play for the number of children that have been born in the last 2 years. I'm sure it's my imagination whirls at the ideas of what's been happening for those miraculous creations to take place.
Is that correlated with the amount of alcohol that's been sold?
I'd imagine it probably is. I mean, alcohol is a fantastic social lubricant, I hear. So I imagine it does have something to do with it. But and again, you don't want to peg your colours to the mast too quickly, but something has to give. There's only so much kicking of the can down the road that can be done before A, you run out of road, or B, the can is dented to fuck and it won't be kicked any further, right? There's no self-perpetuating machine here. One of the 2 things has to run out, or you're going to get a sore foot from kicking, right? So there are multiple avenues that are going to prevent this from continuing on. But I'll reinstate what I said last week is, more harm is being done by the kicking of the can than actually it being dealt with. And there are easier ways for it to be dealt with rather than, banks closing up, preventing crystallization of debt and, liquidating as much as possible. There are preventative measures. And I mentioned one of the asset managers who did the friendly handshake thing first. Can we help you out? You're getting close. Can we do this? This is how we can resolve it. That's smart action, but it's not industry wide. But I still think there's going to be more stock. How that stock is going to be priced, I think we left it on a cliffhanger last week. Yeah, that I think is reasonably. We haven't specified this. Reasonably priced stock entering into the market in 2022. That's not tangible. Stock entering the market, I believe, is. And I think that's the disparity between value and the economies around that is going to be the interesting part for me.
I think that's a cracking point. I think, when I do the sort of month, every sort of 4 weeks or so in the supplement, I do an update on a few areas of interest from the biggest market in the country in London, all the way down to some teeny ones like Ilkeston, where I've got some interests, a number of units. And it's that the dichotomy that it's shown between at various points, 80% of stock on market sold subject to contract in bits of Devon, bits of the East Midlands, etc., versus 20% sold subject to contract if we consider central Birmingham alone. So that has been going on in the same market. And a few people, I've been talking about this in Partners in Property quite a bit. And a couple of the members, I'm happy to say that I wouldn't have really looked at this sort of thing, but they told me about a deal that I've done. And I was like, that's a great deal. What a brilliant result, And they were like, oh, I'm glad you like it. I never would have thought of doing that without, reading this and listening to you and stuff first. And I'm like, well, should I be charging a fee?
He's a popular boy Sunday mornings.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
that's got to be something, right? That you kind of have to be proud of, right? That people are watching what you're doing, listening to what you're saying, seeing it isn't just thoughts and words; it's actions and reactions and things like that. And they're going out with some inspiration and trying to do the same thing with the same considerations in mind, right? It's not an education. It's not as simple as monkey see, monkey do, but it is kind of like the possibilities that are open from seeing what people are doing. And it's the same thing for us. We see what people are doing. We're like, how do we do this? Like, we want a piece of that. And we understand, like, especially in property, we understand the metrics and the things that are available to kind of make stuff like that happen. But you've got to be happy that's kind of, especially within the community, you're seeing that within the community. Right?
I'm definitely very proud. I think it's probably dichotomous. It adds pressure but also it adds inspiration to me to push myself to new levels and work harder and do different things as well, and be try to be an example, really. So it's too far, and of course it does fluff the ego a little bit. I mean, let's face it, it's pretty cool as well. So it's trichotomous. Can you be trichotomous, Jay? Is that possible?
You are most welcome to be quadrotomous if you'd like.
Nice.
I'm not going to judge, especially not negatively.
Fab.
You can be trichotomous according to Google. That's maybe what's leading to baby booming.
Well, it's one of those things, Ross. Do or do not. Do or do not. Don't try.
So like in the next 2-3 weeks, we've got all the auctions in December coming up, and like, how do you normally find December for deals in auctions? Do you
want me to go? I bloody love December. I think you set me up for a cracking couple of minutes soliloquy on this one. But I talk a lot at the moment about. I've done it in the supplement this week about normal years and stuff like that, and how they're just not a thing anymore. But I do think, let's look at the base macro psychology. Christmas was cancelled last year. People are going to push the boat out this year. More holidays, not necessarily abroad, but more holidays, more switching off, because the last 2 years has taken a pretty significant mental toll on pretty much everybody. If we're honest with ourselves, more family time has never felt so privileged and important, and all the rest of it. So that's all great. You guys go and do that, and I'll just stick with the auction stock for the UK on my own, if that's okay with you guys. Thank you. But yeah, in seriousness, I think we should be looking at. We've talked about softening, haven't we, over messages, and then in these slots for the last few weeks, and definitely saw some softening. It varies from auction to auction. I won't embarrass the auction house by mentioning their name, even though I'd quite like to. But you're still seeing some places that would have had 30, 40 lots in an October or November auction, and they've got 8. And the business is obviously failing. But even with 8, we were quite close to 1, and we missed a few by like 30, 40k, which at Tiddly level deals is a ridiculous amount to be out by. But I know our numbers aren't that far out, so they were still nuts. But there was one that sold at Guide. There was one that sold $8,000 more than we were willing to pay. So we're in the shaper in a different day, and if that day is the 17th of December or something, for example, then you might get them. So I wish there was auctions on Christmas Eve. I would bloody love that, but I can understand why there isn't.
I completely agree. Like last year, December was difficult because there was a lot of restrictions in place, and it wasn't the right time, and the stock that was on the market, it still kind of sold well. But historically, in the good old days, kind of historically, December was that September and December were always brilliant opportunities. Had historically always been brilliant opportunities for me to buy, and actually, I found, looking at some of the, I wouldn't say I'm a statistics person, but I can see numbers and I can see a pattern. And with the whole COVID thing and a lot of auctioneers going online, I love an August auction. So now August, September, and December. So now I've gone from 2 good months of the year to 3 good months of the year to buy. And I used to love a July auction, obviously, because a lot of people would bugger off on holidays. So a lot of the high-powered developers and investors would piss off to the Gran Canaria or Thailand or wherever it is they took their bouncing little family off on the hollybobs, and they would leave the competition empty. And I think, this is brilliant. This is absolutely amazing. And they'd get back, obviously, too late for the early September auctions. In December, they'd piss off again, and poor languages abound, of course, because I'm on the call. But the reality of the situation is that now there are a good 4 auctions a year where you could you don't wait for those auctions. You don't just pay attention to those auctions, because as you say, there are auctions where things sell on Guide all the time, or even below Guide. We've been seeing some of that in the last month-ish. That's an interesting one. Or we were bidding on something, the back end of was at the beginning of this month. It was at the beginning of this month. And the reserve was hit £20,000 below the upper guide. So feasibly, if there wasn't competition, that property could have sold below the guide price. So there are things that are changing within the dynamic of guides and reserves that I think need to be picked up upon a little bit. But if I was selling an auction, I would staple my balls to the wall and say I would still sell in a February auction. February auction every year. Like you cannot...
Hopefully, for the sake of your balls, you're not selling anything at the moment.
Well, I'm planning on selling stuff. I might sell some stuff for people just off the back of that comment. You never know. But I think that's the level of confidence that I have in a February market.
Piotr, I think we need to have a chat about your business development.
We need some stock to sell.
Yeah. I don't want anyone to ever say that I'm not a ballsy person.
Right, I've got a house for you, G.
Yes. Yes, Ross. Whatever you
Get
want
your balls in the wall. Come on.
Next Sunday, 10 a.m. Live on OnlyFans. Jay Howard.
There is some metrics that just haven't moved, and February auctions is just one of those ones that it hasn't faltered. And I think I take a lot of confidence from that, enough to risk the family jewels. But it's a really good kind of market for auctions.
Agreed.
Nice. Well, we're approaching 11 o'clock almost. What else that to be discussed?
Have we had any questions or anything? I've only got my phone, so I'm not able to see.
Some comments, mostly just kind of like comments that just add to the conversation.
Comments about Jay's balls, mostly, I'd imagine, at this point.
Believe it or not, there has been a recent comment about my balls.
Here you go, Jay.
Thank you, Anil. There we go.
Yeah, Dominic never disappoints with questions. Do you think holidaying property traders will now be buying from auctions online whilst in Thailand?
It's a really good point, isn't it? Really good point. Unfortunately, some of them probably, some of them.
Nowadays it's so easy to do those things because every auction house is set up for online buying, and then you can get viewers and you can get people to go and see properties, and you can do videos. And
I shouldn't really say this live, really, but I'm going to. There's a legendary Irish horse racing punter called Barney Curley, right? And it's well worth Googling the story of Yellow Sam. I'm gonna share it one time in the supplement. It's an absolute belter. But basically, what Mr. Curley did is, I think it was Bellstown or it was somewhere like that. He identified a course where the only way they could relay this is before the days of mobile phones, to be clear. They could only relay information over the phone, and there was only one phone line, and it was a pay phone, right? And what he did was he paid someone to go into that payphone booth before racing, and then have a fake conversation that lasted about 5 hours with a dying aunt on the other end of the phone. There was no dying aunt. That was the point. And they couldn't get the info. And Barney had set a horse up for this race. It was his first price was 20-1, and a typical Barney Curley one. If it goes, then it starts to absolutely collapse because they just know. They all know. But this one was 20-1, and it stayed at 20-1 and was returned. So the SP returner could not get on the phone. So it was returned at 20-1, even though it should have been returned at about 6-4. And let's just say Mr. Curley had a pretty decent day. So if you thought about applying the logic of Yellow Sam in these instances, perhaps some hackers could interfere with the auction feed. Obviously, I would not countenance anything like that. But if anyone wants to have a chat, no, I'm joking. I am joking. Let me be clear, I'm joking. But I wouldn't be surprised if Anonymous or similar organisation could be co-opted to. The internet's down. What a shame. And they're definitely going to be open. They're definitely going to be open.
Doesn't sound ideal.
I think just check your cyber stuff. We've got someone in PIP whose wife runs a cyber security company, Ross. So we'll make that conversation happen.
What guy says at Network Auctions that they chap bidding from the boats, and he says he had such a good time that he bid more than he was anticipating. Well, that happens quite often.
I'm sure David Sandeman's got a story like that as well, hasn't he?
I think one of the the holidaying kind of traders bidding and things like that. I think if you are a trader, I don't think a holiday is going to stop you. But if you're the average investor, a buy-to-let landlord, if you're on holiday, let's say you're the husband, right? If I go on holiday and my wife sees me doing any work, I am in a mountainous amounts of shit. Like, my focus has to be on this quality family time, on this holiday that we've forked out X number of thousands of pounds for. I will not be allowed to sit there and bid.
The stapler comes out again, and the poor old ball get another bit.
That's it. I'll be stapled to the wall somewhere, somehow. And you know what? It gets to the point where you start enjoying it, but that's a completely separate conversation.
What holiday are they stapling?
This is like Billions. This is like Chuck Rhodes. He's in law degree as well. Yeah. In a different light, Jay. Maybe if you dyed the beard slightly, actually, you know what?
I think so. But look, I think I think the accessibility of auctions has definitely changed the dynamic of people being away, but I don't think it's changed the focus that people will be having when they're away. A lot of the property people, who are doing phenomenal things, when they go on holiday, they're like, no, this is now holiday time. Maybe they'll be, picking up the phone to emergencies in the office and stuff like that. But for the most part, they're taking a step back. I don't know how much that's going to change for like the proper property people. For most investors, I think, if you're a rain or shine kind of investor, it doesn't matter where you are or what you're buying. You're there to do it, aren't you?
That's a good question that's just come in there from Webby. I mean, my answer to that is no, although my GDVs have shifted based on sold prices achieved. So I have definitely adapted to markets that have grown quite a lot in the last couple of years, especially when I felt they were too cheap for years and years and years and years. And now just because they've gone up 10 or 15%, it hasn't stopped me from thinking there's still more growth there. And I don't feel there's a bubble there. So my GDVs have shifted. But what I don't then do is pay more on top of that to deploy capital or to get into that market. So that's my take on that one.
Have your GDVs increased because cost of labour and cost of materials has increased rather than increased values, or is it an amalgamation of all of those?
No, the GDVs are definitely just going on sold prices, but the willingness to pay for some lots has gone down. You're quite right in what you say, because labour and materials cost has gone up so much. So we're trying to do nowcasting / dynamic pricing. Of course we are. So we've definitely gone into auction looking to pay less than we would have paid in 2019 for certain types of lots. We don't spend a lot of time on those lots because we know that we're going to be probably miles off, but we do spend 10-20% of our focus on those sorts of things just in case, because if they don't sell, if this happens, if that happens, if you're at the auction, online is fine, but you don't get those conversations with the auctioneer.
Yeah.
You don't get the deals done because the vendor's in the room. And we've done lots of deals at some of the auctions we've been talking about when we were in the green room or whatever you want to call it. We've done lots of deals like that. As I know you guys have done as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would, even going into next year, I'd be looking at pre-October 2018 kind of values. Because there was a lot that kind of kicked off October 2018 that persisted for about 6 months, which really affected the value of 3-bedroom houses or HMOs and things like that. A lot kind of stung the marketplace. So I think if you're looking at an area and you can see sold prices in and around mid to late 2018, I think that was probably a plateau. Where values kind of just moved sideways for a bit. And actually, I don't like looking at the slump values or the high values, but the plateau normally tells you where resistances are. And I think those are normally kind of safe places to to kind of measure, value over a period of time.
With a comment like that, we're almost back round to crypto, really, if we start talking about resistance levels and stuff like that. So that's quite cool. That's quite clever.
With this comment is from Dominic, which I think pretty much we answered over the course of today's session.
Yeah, I think you'll have to watch the replay, Dom, I'm afraid, but we have pretty much covered that, I think. But maybe, just spoiler alert, maybe, and we hope so. My number for next year is going to be around 6.5 to 7% growth, capital growth across the UK. That's my heuristics and a few base numbers that I've been throwing around. I still think, well, I think that's where it'll probably go because despite Jay's majestic can analogies, I still think there's a bit of life in the leg yet, and there's still 2 or 3 more dents we could probably put in it, and I think we'll see them next year. So hence why the supply side I don't think will necessarily sort itself out, and this excess demand has not worked its way all the way through the pipe yet either.
Yeah.
And now, retail buyers traditionally start going to sleep around this time of year. Any estate agent will tell you that. There's always that little surge in Boxing Day onwards that comes back. So we'll start with a bang-ish. I think the important thing is not to look at always what the market is doing. It's probably to look at how the market is reacting to the big bits of news that there are. Because if it continues to push through, you haven't necessarily got to those resistance levels yet that you were just talking about. It's more what the reaction is to the news is more important than what you think you should do with the news. If you know what, if that makes sense, in my view, anyway.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's come back to the questions and everything next week. I think this has been a really good session. We covered quite a lot of ground. Maybe 5% of what's in Adam's supplement. So if you want more, there's a good reading over there. And anything else to add, guys?
No, I'm good. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. See you next